Start with your career journey. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you made your way to be the global VP of non-alcoholic beverages at Anheuser-Busch?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit of the story. I think I really, and if you look at my LinkedIn, you get a little bit of that, but I really think of my career as kind of, this choose your own adventure book, like those, old books that I used to have where if you flip to this page, the story goes one way. If you flip to the other page, the story goes a different way. And that was really kind of a part of the exploration that I pursued as, early on in my career, really being open to explore a lot of different roles, a lot of different project types, a lot of different functions within the organization. And this was really my way to kind of invest in a growth mindset and really kind of, have a lot of curiosity to kind of get that full perspective. And part of it was, also not really being 100% sure of what I wanted to do, and really kind of giving myself that permission to explore and learn, and then start kind of, you know, narrowing in a bit until I figure out like what it is that I want to do when I grow up, which I think I'm still kind of working on. But the path really started, coming out of college, working in a really small brand consultancy type of role, not prestigious at all. It was in North Carolina, and it was in a way a very startup type of environment. And of course at the time, you're just happy to have your first
Yeah.
professional experience. But I think looking back, I think that experience really allowed me to start gaining a much larger breadth of experience than perhaps I would have done if I had gone in, let's say, to a larger, more well-established company. It was a very entrepreneurial startup type of environment. One day, if you had to be the account person, you're the account person. If you had to be the research person, you were the research person. And that type of environment then really pushes you in a way. It's very uncomfortable and very, especially earlier in your career, but it really pushes you to be able to kind of, understand how different parts of the business works together. So I did that and spent, just about 2 years there, then went into grad school at Northwestern. After grad school, I went into a large agency, Draft FCB at the time, I think now FCB. I think I have some of my amazing colleagues from there here today as well. And it was a job that really kind of harnessed a lot of my international background, since I've moved around a lot. And I did the strategic planning on the SC Johnson account. And really just learned a ton from the team that I was surrounded with, and also from the client side. I think we had a really unique agency client relationship. We had been their agency for over 50 years. We were very close into the business, and I think I learned a lot from SC Johnson in terms of, consumer goods and team culture and leadership. And I think it was really kind of great to start even from the agency side, gaining deeper and deeper into like the consumer, package space. And I gained kind of a lot of interest in it, a lot of curiosity. And I wanted to, what if I do go client side, and what if I explore that path, right? So I turned my explore your own adventure book to that page, and ended up being recruited into PepsiCo. I spent about 8 years at PepsiCo. And at PepsiCo, I tried to do as much as I could because it was my first time on the client side. I spent about 4 years of that in Chicago, working on the global juice business. And I did everything from insights to brand management to innovation to strategy, and really kind of always from a global lens. The Chicago office was where the global team sat. And then spent the other half of those 8 years in China, where I moved to Shanghai, and
Wow.
I was kind of operating the Quaker Oats business there. And it was a very transformational experience being in China. I think I walked out of the China experience like 10 years ahead when it comes to leadership. But it was a great way to close my operating gap, because I had a lot of, marketing / global big picture type of roles, but I've never had kind of more of an operating type of BU in the market, day to day, chasing the shipments type of experience.
Wow.
So that really, really helped. And then about 3 years and a half in Shanghai, then moved to New York to join AB InBev as they were kind of building this global and out team. But I think the big lessons for me of this journey has been, seeking the new perspectives, taking some risks, and I was listening to the previous talk, and I think it's right. It's a very personal decision, but how do you take risks just to push yourself, focus on the learning first and foremost, and just getting kind of good at being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. I love that openness in your career. I think I agree. It leads to so many new opportunities that maybe you would never have considered for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you think, what were your biggest learnings along the way throughout your journey, which has been very exciting, by the way?
Yeah, I think, for me, never to be was always kind of like it's nerve-wracking, but never be afraid to try something even once, just to even discover that you don't like it. I think that's so important. And I remember this was actually something that I did back in college. I took like I thought at some point I was going to go into law school, and I took like a pre-law class. And it was like the worst thing. I hated it, but it made me learn. It was a tough class. Like I wasn't able to get into it, but I learned something about myself that was not what I wanted to do. So I think it's really important to, be open to those experiences, even if it is to just learn that you don't want to do it. And then eventually you also have more context about that experience as you eventually have to work with somebody that's in that type of role. I say also, try to be, I try to be as open to challenging projects. I think, I have a little bit of a reputation for being somebody that takes tough assignments and not necessarily, be nervous. I usually find that, yes, tough assignments are demanding, but I think you learn a ton. And I think there is a general positivity that comes from being somebody that kind of signs up for things that haven't been done before, for things that are like unclear, a little bit fuzzy. And personally, I somebody that enjoy that type of environment where you kind of have to figure out because we haven't really done this before.
Yeah, well, that actually is a great segue to the next question, which is, so you're at Anheuser-Busch, but you're on the non-alcoholic side. So how did Anheuser-Busch come to develop the non-alcoholic side of their business?
Yeah, I think that links perfectly to this point of, take the weird roles. So we've had as a company this non-alcoholic portfolio actually for many, many years. But it was never managed. We are, a remarkable beer company with a huge history and leadership in beer and alcohol. So the non-alcoholic portfolio was always there, just never really managed in a very centralized, strategic manner. It was kind of always a way to complement the alcohol portfolio, many times a way to drive efficiencies. We had some amazing partners as well. We partner with Pepsi Cola, with Coca-Cola, with Red Bull. So it's not like necessarily a new portfolio. But as the company started seeing trends around health and wellness, around consumers moderating more their alcohol intake, there's a whole movement around being sober curious. There was kind of this, awakening that the non-alcoholic portfolio actually could play a much more central role in bringing incremental growth for the company. And the company has also a super powerful kind of, mission or purpose, which is to bring people together. And when we talk about bringing people together, it's not just beer people, right? It's how we bring all people together. So realizing kind of we have this portfolio that we could do more with it. All the consumer trends in terms of serving our community, serving people. This is a very relevant part of the portfolio. We just have not maybe maximized it as much. And linking to our purpose of bringing people together, it made sense the company to pivot and now create a more centralized strategic play for this non-alcoholic portfolio.
Okay, cool. And I think the last time we talked, you mentioned that there was some research around Gen Z that may have had an impact there. How has that research around Gen Z impacted your marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think Gen Z is a generation that's helping us really rethink a lot of of the ways that we've been building brands, engaging with people. How they think about the role of product, the causes are so important to them. The role of things like, mental health is really important to Gen Z. So all of those aspects, all of the values that Gen Z is bringing, I think has been great provocations for us as a business and for many industries to really rethink many of those aspects. one of the ways we talk about Gen Z, like compared to millennials, which was kind of the FOMO generation, like
Yeah.
Gen Z is really the JOMO generation. It's like the joy of missing out. They don't need to be that extreme versus the fear of missing out. So I think there's a lot that we've learned, and they've definitely influenced us in how we are thinking, not only about portfolio, but how do we engage people in a meaningful way.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. So, we talked a little bit about this. I know when you joined, it was a newish team in a very well-established company. How did that change your experience and your approach in your new role?
Yeah, I think this has been a great lesson for me, and I continue to learn through this experience. But when you're chartering such a unique or new space for a company, especially a company that has like such a strong heritage, right, in a specific category, I think there's a whole new level of intentionality that you need to have when you're building that strategy, when you're building the team, because it becomes not only about the work that you do externally to get your products out there, to connect with people, to build the right experiences, but it becomes as important the internal work. So how do we build visibility in the organization? How do you educate the organization that really knows a lot about one space, like in our case beer, to know and be as good as this new space of NANAUC? How do you invest in the talent in a unique way? And I think you have to be so intentional about all those aspects, because you kind of have the double work of doing the external work and then doing the internal heavy lifting as well. Some of the questions that I think we as a team, at a global team, but then in working with our teams in the market, ask ourselves is, how as a business, knowing that we are now, can we maximize the strengths of the big machine, as we call it, right? Because we are lucky that we operate within a such a great company, and how it is that we can maximize that, and how it is that we give back to the machine as well. So as an example, we often talk about like being this unique business. How can we be a lab for experimentation, that then we can try new things that other businesses in the company or other brands in the company can learn from as well. We also talk a lot about like, how do we earn our space and visibility within the organization, right? How do we recruit allies and sponsors in the organization? And I think keeping that share of mind for us is really, really important, and it's something that we're very intentional about building. And then we also look for ways that how do we maximize the fact that we are this unique, odd, business in a way, to our benefit and to its full potential. We don't see that as a barrier, so we really try to think of the space. That gives us the space to do things differently, and it becomes a massive asset to us as a team. If we look at it from an advantage point of view, this allows us to implement strategies that are very disruptive. This allows us to invest in our talent in different ways. So how it is that you use the fact that you are such a unique part of the business to your advantage, I think that's a big part of it.
I love that. I love that idea of contributing back to the organization as well. It's a give and take.
Absolutely.
That's an awesome way to think of it. And what's it like being a woman in the beer industry, which I think is a pretty male dominant industry?
It is, but I actually don't think it is much different than being a woman in most industries, in most male-dominated environments, because all these, they're all governed by a very similar system that is what creates the barriers and challenges for diverse perspectives. And it's not only women; it's LGBTQ, it's Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It's all the different points of views that kind of do face the challenges of operating in a male-dominated space. Recently I've been kind of reflecting. I think a lot of people have watched the interview between Meghan Markle and Oprah, right? And whether you agree with what was shared or not, or whether you believe it or not, whether you question it because of obviously their position of influence and power and wealth that comes with being very famous public people. But what I reflect a lot on the interview is just kind of some of the themes and patterns that she talked about that I think really reflect the experience of women in male dominated spaces. She talked a lot about having your experience in the organization being dismissed. She talked about, not being heard or given, a space or a seat at the table to be able to kind of share what your experience has been. She talked about the lack of access to resources that she needed. She talked about kind of the lack of support and, in a way, sponsorship that to help her kind of navigate what it was to kind of enter this space, being minimized, being kind of invalidated, in her case, both gender and race. So I think, I reflected a lot on that interview, because of course it's a very unique thing to be entering the royal family, but in a way, a lot of the patterns you see in male-dominated spaces are some of the challenges that are very real for women in many corporations.
Yeah. And so do you have any tips for women or people who are more diverse in marketing who do want to make an impact in a more sort of male dominant, non-diverse industry?
Yeah. I think for me, the first thing is to really be aware that that's the environment you're navigating, and that's the system and the reality that you're navigating. And that awareness just allows you to be more effective in navigating it, because we all have to do it. So I think that's for me the first thing. The second thing is just being super intentional about building allies, building a network, and becoming ally to others. I think that's really important, because it is, like we said, like a give and take, right? And then try, and this is hard, but try to, as much as you can, to not hold back on your potential. And this is something that really, I think, took me some time to get to a place where I really feel like I can maximize it, because that potential is what sets you apart, and it can be very hard to do. But as much as possible, don't hold back on letting our potential come out.
I love that. Okay, great. So just moving on a little bit to the topic of mentorship, which I think is a pretty popular topic for those of us who are women or very diverse and non-diverse industries. Were there any specific lessons that you learned from a mentor of yours that really stuck with you and helped you in your current leadership role that you could share with us today? Yeah.
And actually, also think some of my mentors might be watching us today, and a big thank you to them, because they've invested in me, and I really kind of appreciate their continued investment in me and my success. But I think there's two kind of pieces of advice that I've taken away from a couple of mentors. The first piece of advice is around the more senior that you get in an organization, the more of your time will be put into challenging, difficult situations and problems. When things are going well, your teams are running it, everything is great. They're the ones kind of representing, and they do, a lot of the work and make the success happen. And then you're usually coming in when there's something more challenging happening. And the importance of making sure that you're building your resilience and your stamina to being very effective of managing bad news and managing challenges, so that you're always inspiring our different teams to work through it. And it's something that I never really had stopped to think about until I had a sponsor and a mentor that specifically told me, like, hey, as you're taking this role, really do keep this in mind, because you can get very overwhelmed by it very quickly, but more and more you get brought in to deal when things are not going as well. And to me, it really helped something click in terms of, as I take on, bigger businesses or bigger teams, how do you make sure that you can build that self-resilience, because then you can be more effective for your team and for your business. And actually, recently I was watching a TED talk from a ER doctor, and as a trauma ER doctor, and she was exactly had this point, because basically our ER doctor is dealing with just constant bad, difficult situations coming in. And there was a great learning that was shared that was about, like, the importance of the triage as a first step, which is their way of ranking, like what's most critical versus least critical, so that they can, spend all their time and energy first on what's the most critical thing, and then work their way down to things that are not life-threatening. And I thought that was just such a good model as you're a senior leader, like triaging, it's going to be a list of things you have to deal with that are challenging, but triage that, prioritize what's most critical, and build that resilience to just then work through that list.
Yeah, and you just mentioned you mentioned sponsorship. I think you meant to say mentorship, but you had made an interesting point the last time we talked about mentorship versus sponsorship, and especially when it comes to closing the gender gap or trying to close it, or trying to close the diversity gap as well. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, and let me maybe start by kind of talking about how I see the difference between the both. So mentors to me is someone at any level of the organization that really helps you navigate the organization or navigate specific areas based on objectives that you have. And they give you perspective and advice on how to kind of tackle certain situations. And I can tell you today, a lot of my team members are my mentors. They based on their different experiences, they give me advice on how I should navigate certain situations. My assistant is one of my mentors. She sometimes see things that she can give me perspective on how to manage it. And it's really, really important to kind of have those trust relationships. And then I also have more formal mentors, so more senior kind of formal mentors that help me kind of think through different challenges. I think a sponsor is a different thing. A sponsor is really a very senior leader that has influence in an organization and is able to give you exposure, access, and is constantly using their equity and organizational capital to enable your growth. So it's somebody that's kind of opening doors
Yeah.
and kind of helping you create a seat at the table. Both are extremely important, and they play different roles, but it's good to know the difference so you can nurture both in different ways. I think what happens with women, and I think it's HBR had a really recent article on this as well, is that they get over mentored and under sponsored. So they get a lot of coaching programs and a lot of kind of advice and so on, which is all great. But then sometimes there's an under sponsoring that happen. Who is that senior leader that's going to use their equity, organizational capital to open doors, demand that talent kind of gets the exciting projects, get the challenging projects, get the visible projects to be able to open doors for growth. So I think those both are really, really, really important.
Interesting. So sponsorship is more like somebody lending access to you, basically.
Yes.
Opening the door. Got it.
And their influence and their capital is how they are able to do that for you.
Interesting. Okay, great. So what kind of lessons do you focus on with the people that you mentor?
Yeah. It really depends on the person. I think different people are kind of navigating different stages of their career or different kind of paths that they want to move forward. But typically I like to, there's two things I think are very consistent. One is growth. And I don't mean growth as in just kind of climbing the ladder. I mean growth in terms of experience, a growth mindsets, looking at things in a different way. And then I also feel like the role as a mentor is to help with some accountability, right? So making sure that my mentees have clear plans for themselves, that they are expanding as part of that the way they would typically approach different situations, and being that accountability partner that can follow up and say like, hey, we talked, last time we talked about you reaching out to this person to get like, have you reached out and how did that conversation go? Or if you haven't, why not? Because sometimes you need kind of that type of push. And I think that's the amazing partnership that you can create with mentors. And that's what my mentors do for me as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good to know. I'll have to try this a little bit more with my mentees and my mentors as well, hopefully. So, switching gears a little bit, we talk about how in marketing, we have a unique platform and a voice that we can use to influence change. So is there anything that you and your team at AB InBev have done to influence change, whether in terms of access for women or the broader goal of supporting diversity that you're particularly proud of that you could share with us?
Yeah. And I'm really so excited and proud to work with my team around the world. They really are a group of people that are constantly pushing the thinking and leveraging this powerful platform that we have for positive change. And it's been really across the board, from the way we're approaching brand purposes to the ways that we are activating, or even in internal kind of processes. We've really continued to push the thinking and try new approaches to advance that agenda. But let me give you a couple examples. We have an amazing team in Colombia, led by Targino, but we have an amazing marketing leader, Juan, and they're really doing an amazing work with one of our brands called Pony Malta, which is a very iconic Colombian brand, creating a platform that tackles both kind of female representation as well as bullying. because it's a brand that is kind of a family-oriented brand. And they created an amazing platform because what they learned is that as gaming becomes a bigger and bigger space, that some games are actually not very representative of the gaming population, right? So what they did, for example, is they looked at FIFA, which is the soccer game, and they realized that to create a professional team within FIFA, it could only be a male team. You're not allowed to create a female professional team. So what they did is they kind of try to hack that space and create a female FIFA team themselves, as a way to kind of, bring out the fact that why are the professional level teams in FIFA not allowing female representation? Another one of our brands, this time in Brazil, we have an amazing leader there, Pablo, and the marketing team that runs Guaraná brand, which is an iconic soda brand in Brazil, actually created a platform that's dedicated to the female national soccer team. And as you know, soccer is, a big deal in Brazil. Like, we avoid soccer debates at work because it can get heated, but it's the male sports that usually get a lot of sponsorship and funding. And so a lot of the platform that they create is actually to fund the national female soccer team. And the latest campaign is that they were able to use their cans, and it's one of the largest, most iconic Brazilian sodas, to be able to invite other brands to be able to fund the national soccer team. So by doing that, they would then publish the partner brands logo on our cans. So we would have, for example, Guaraná and Burger King, or Guaraná and Natura, which is a big cosmetic company in Brazil. So those people were then getting visibility in our cans, which are all over Brazil, but all the funding and supports going to the national female soccer team. So those are some ways from a brand perspective. But in addition to that, we try to do a lot of things internally to try to support, that representation and that diversity. Whether it's the way that we recruit, or whether it's the way we also look into partners, so marketing partners, for example. We've set for ourselves a requirement that we request diversity data from all of our potential partners as a way to select the best and strongest team, because diversity means performance, and we want the best performing teams working in our business. To the fact that we sponsor different type of groups to be able to gain access to professional experiences. So we're right now sponsoring Marina, who's an amazing student from Brazil, to have an experience with our working with our global team. We also support her in learning English so that she can really have like a positive path in growing. So these are all the different ways that we try to kind of use our platform and our resources to be able, and our privilege to be able to give more access.
I love it. It's awesome. So we have a bunch of great questions here. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in since we're kind of in the QA point. Yeah. So first, Anna, how has your experience and learnings in China framed your approach to your current global role?
Yeah, so I think the China experience for me was transformational, particularly on leadership, and team leadership and people leadership. Because once I moved to China and had to now operate in Chinese, you quickly realize that there's a lot of things you're not able to do yourself. So I couldn't do the basics of going to a store, looking at my shelf sets and trying to see what are the competitors claiming. I couldn't read that. When you feel like a project sometimes is not going the way you need it to, you can, if you're mastering that language, it's very easy for you to just absorb that work or micromanage it and do it yourself. And that was impossible in China. So I think the China lesson for me in terms of leadership is completely shaped and changed my strength as a team leader, to be somebody that's, just because I literally could not do it, I had to learn to be somebody that knows how to ask good questions, that can guide the work, but really empower the team, trust the team, and create an environment where everyone feels like they want to just bring their best to work. So I think that China, there's many things about living in China. I highly recommend anyone to do this. But for me, if there's one thing, was really about kind of changing my leadership and becoming a more effective leader.
Yeah, through collaboration. That's awesome. I love to hear that. That's let's see, what else do we have here? This is a wonderful conversation. Love the Gen Z JOMO framing. Can Anna tell us about the upcoming non-A communication plans about the mission of bringing all people together? Is there a little more you can share there?
Yeah, so bringing people together is our, I mentioned ABI, AB and Bev, kind of purpose dream, and then as we kind of look at new spaces, we really pause to think like, how do we bring all people together? Um, we've only been a team in NALC for about 2 years, so we are in the process now after we set the strategy for the first time, really organize ourselves as a team, and then worked our way through COVID because
Yeah.
year two of the business was the global pandemic, which we're still in today. I think now we are spending a lot of time kind of thinking about how do we talk about this business and our kind of purpose for it in a broader, bigger way. So there's more to come on that. But I think it's really, for us, it's really about kind of, we talk a lot about, wellness as a big pillar of our road, wellness in a very holistic way, not just physical wellness, but the wellness of my community, of my environment, my mental
Hmm.
wellness. And we are a social company due to the nature of our heritage. So we always talk about this notion of how do we celebrate wellness in your way? How do we celebrate the wellness that's right for you?
Yeah.
So that's how like we're heading with our communication around bringing all people together.
Okay, great. And since you mentioned the pandemic, so how has the pandemic affected your partnerships with other brands, or has it?
Um, I think the pandemic has really, in a way, brought all of us together. This was kind of a global humanitarian crisis,
Yeah.
and I think we, as an industry, came together. I think as partners, we came together. We worked on, for instance, our brand in Brazil, Guaraná. We were able to use, there's a big, Brazil's going through a very difficult COVID moment right now, and even at the beginning of the pandemic, there's a lot of protective gear shortage. So instead of using the PT that we use for packaging, we actually use that PT to create face shields
Oh,
to donate to every single member of the healthcare system in Brazil. So, and we did oftentimes a
wow.
lot of these efforts with our partners, right? So we were constantly thinking as a team, how can we repurpose what we have to be able to support this global humanitarian crisis. So I think it made our relationship stronger. We really came together to have one purpose, was to help us all get through that pandemic.
Great, love it. All right, let's see. We've got another one here. As leaders, you are always developing your abilities. What skills would you like your marketing team to develop this year?
This year we've been talking about two key, I guess, topics, many topics, but two that come to mind. One is performance marketing. As we go more digital in our business models, direct to consumer brands, I think performance marketing is something that we are becoming more and more deep in, and becoming a bigger and bigger part of how we want to measure success, and make sure that everything that we are doing has this performance marketing angle in mind, which can be a kind of a bit different than the old, more traditional kind of just brand
Yeah.
purpose equity building. And then the second part that I think links a bit to that is full funnel marketing, especially being in the non-alcoholic space where we don't have as much of the sometimes constraints that going direct to consumer that maybe alcohol has. How do we maximize that to really create full funnel experiences for our consumers to make their journey as smooth as possible?
Okay, great. And then I think we have one more here. We have 5 minutes. So let's see. When it comes to communicating with your consumers, how do you think about brand purpose, and how does that impact your approach to marketing?
Yeah, I think brand purpose is, of course, it's been a hot topic for a while. I think consumers are looking to join brands, not just buy brands, right? And I always think about this like every time, like when I go buy an iPhone, like very rarely do I want to know the functions of the iPhone and all the specs. Like I buy into the smooth, easy experience that's at the heart of Apple as a brand. I usually just say like, get me the iPhone that has the maximum storage because I take a lot of pictures and I don't want to have to be deleting things. But other than that, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about those details. So I think that's where purpose has a big power, because it consumers join your brand. They're not just buyers of your brand. And then how do you make sure that you stay consistent? How do you make sure that you're always putting the consumer first as you're building your purpose, and it evolves over time. But investing in that and investing in that consistency, I think, is key.
Okay, awesome. And then we have one more. What soft skills do you feel have been the most important in your career growth?
That's a great question. I, grew up in a very international, moving around. I've lived in 7 countries. Some of it when I was younger, some of it with work. And I think one thing that's, to me, a significant advantage of having that experience, although it was hard at the time, was the ability to be able to connect with people, to really understand where they are coming from, so that you can think about, how can they have an amazing experience in whatever it is that we might be working on. And in my career, I see that, I really, whenever I have to work with a new team, I really try to understand, like, how is this a win-win situation? That's something that I feel sometimes we overlook a bit, because we want to get things done. We want to get to the end and deliver and push. But I think I'm always building in, like, how is this a win-win for everyone here, both at a team level, but also at a personal level.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Isabel, do we have time for a couple quick fire questions?
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
Awesome. All right. Ready, Nana?
Yes.
Okay. Morning routine. How do you set your day up for success?
So first thing, actually, my morning routine starts at night. So I'm very intentional about doing gratefulness exercises before bed, because it helps me fall asleep and focus on, good things that happen. And I actually do it with my husband. We do it together. And then the morning is, I drink 1 liter of water before I'm even out of bed. I have to shower, or else I cannot function. I don't wake up if I don't shower. And then spend some time with my dog. So those are the key things.
That sounds like a lovely morning. What was your latest Netflix binge?
I am currently, I'm currently in the QAnon binge. I think that was it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting.
Terrifying.
And it's always good to see kind of, a perspective of a significant sizable group of people, actually, and how they see the world through that. So it's been kind of a good learning, to be frank. And I just started, which actually I don't think it's Netflix, but I just started Billions, which has been more of a fun binge.
Yes, that's on my list too. Awesome. Current book you're reading?
I'm reading a book called Range, which actually was a post and a recommendation. Bill Gates releases, like, the books that he likes to read, and I saw this one. But it's really about kind of learning how breadth of experience can help you become more effective versus just narrowness and depth of experience. So it's been kind of an interesting perspective.
Great. And last one, next place you'd like to visit, assuming, we get to travel soon.
I think, to be honest, I would love to go back to China. It's been 2 years since I moved back. And China moves so fast, and we have such fun memories. So we always talk about, it'd be great to visit China again.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I think are we at time? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I would also love to visit China, but for the first time. So maybe soon, once we can travel again and everything. But thank you so much, Anna and Courtney, for such a great conversation. I learned so much about the non-alcoholic brand at Anheuser-Busch, which is something I really didn't know too much about before. So it was really great to have you and hear what kind of work you're up to. So thank you so much for
Courtney,
joining us.
Thank you,
so
Anna.
great to connect again. And Isabel, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.